The rain was pounding against the conference room windows when I discovered the text message that would unravel 8 years of what I thought was a solid marriage. I wasn't snooping, wasn't looking for trouble. Lisa had asked me to grab her phone from the charging station because hers had died during our quarterly team meeting. As I picked it up, the screen lit up with a notification that made my blood run cold. Thanks for the therapist recommendation. Dr. Hayes seems perfect for us. Can't wait for our first session tomorrow. You're amazing, Lisa. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The message was from Ryan, our company's 26-year-old marketing associate, the same Ryan who Lisa supervised. The same Ryan who had been working late with her for the past 3 months on what she called critical campaign strategies. The same Ryan who somehow needed our marriage counselor's contact information. I stood there in that sterile conference room, watching the Seattle skyline blur through rain-soaked windows, holding my wife's phone like it was evidence in a crime I didn't know had been committed. 8 years of marriage, 2 miscarriages, countless date nights, weekend getaways, and shared dreams. And Lisa was giving our most intimate professional relationship to another man. Not just any man, but someone who was barely out of college when we were planning our wedding. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It creeps in through text messages, unexplained over time, and the gradual erosion of intimacy that you convince yourself is just the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. For months, I'd been telling myself that Lisa's distance was stress from her promotion to marketing director. Her late nights were dedication to her career. Her decreased interest in our weekend plans was exhaustion from climbing the corporate ladder. Dr. Patricia Hayes had been our marriage counselor for 6 months. We started seeing her after our second miscarriage left us both emotionally devastated and struggling to connect. Those sessions were supposed to be our sacred space, our chance to rebuild what pregnancy loss had damaged. Lisa would sit on that beige couch in Dr. Hayes' office, tissues always within reach, talking about feeling disconnected and misunderstood. She spoke about needing someone who could relate to her professional ambitions. Someone who understood the pressure she was under as one of the youngest directors in our company's history. I thought she was talking about me. I thought we were working through our grief together, learning to support each other better. Apparently, she was describing what she had already found with Ryan. The irony wasn't lost on me that Ryan was joining our Portland tech startup the same week. Lisa and I had our worst fight in years. It was a stupid argument about household responsibilities that escalated into accusations about career priorities and emotional availability. Lisa stormed out and didn't come home until 2 in the morning, claiming she'd been driving around to clear her head. The next Monday, Ryan started in her department, fresh out of university with his marketing degree and an enthusiasm that reminded me of Lisa when we first met. Ryan was everything I wasn't anymore. I had grown cautious after years of responsibility. In disappointment, he was optimistic. Where I carried the weight of our pregnancy losses and the pressure of being the primary breadwinner, he was carefree. Where I had settled into the comfortable routines of a long marriage, he was spontaneous and exciting. Most importantly, where I had witnessed Lisa's vulnerabilities and failures, he saw only her professional success and confidence. The transformation in Lisa over the past 3 months had been gradual but noticeable. She started caring more about her appearance again, buying new clothes, and spending extra time on her makeup. She began talking about work with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard since her promotion. Most tellingly, she started staying late at the office with increasing frequency, always with detailed explanations about urgent projects and tight deadlines. I wanted to believe her. Marriage requires trust, and I'd built 8 years of my life on trusting Lisa completely. When she said she needed to work weekends to prepare for client presentations, I supported her. When she explained that mentoring Ryan was part of her new leadership responsibilities, I admired her dedication. When she suggested we take a break from marriage counseling because her work schedule was too demanding, I agreed, thinking we had made enough progress to handle things on our own. Standing in that conference room, staring at Ryan's text message, I realized how naive I had been. Lisa hadn't been working late. She had been building a relationship with someone else. Now, she hadn't been mentoring a young employee. She had been sharing the most intimate details of our marriage with him. She hadn't suggested pausing therapy because we were doing better. She had wanted to continue those sessions with Ryan instead of me. The conference room door opened, and Lisa walked in, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. She was glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her cheeks flushed with what I now recognized wasn't excitement about quarterly projections. She looked at me, standing by the charging station with her phone in my hand, and for just a moment, I saw panic flash across her face. "David, did you need something?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "The presentation starts in 5 minutes." I looked at my wife of 8 years, the woman who had promised to forsake all others, who had cried in my arms after each pregnancy loss, who had sat beside me in Dr. Hayes' office swearing she wanted to fight for our marriage. In that moment, I saw a stranger wearing Lisa's face, someone who had been living a double life while I remained completely oblivious. "Your phone was buzzing," I said quietly, holding it out to her. "Ryan sent you a message about Dr. Hayes." Lisa's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, taking the phone from my hand with steady fingers. "Oh, that," she said with forced casualness. "He's been having some personal issues with his girlfriend. I thought Dr. Hayes might be able to help them work things out. You know how good she's been for us?" The lie came so easily, so smoothly, that I almost believed it myself. Almost. But I had seen the way Ryan looked at Lisa during team meetings, the way he found excuses to stop. By her office, the way he laughed just a little too hard at her jokes. I had attributed it to normal workplace dynamics, maybe a harmless crush that would fade over time. I never imagined that Lisa was encouraging it, nurturing it, and apparently providing professional therapeutic support for it. "That's thoughtful." "Of you," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "I'm sure Dr. Hayes will be able to help them." Lisa smiled, the same smile she had been giving me for months, and I wondered how many other lies that smile had concealed. She moved closer to me, straightening my tie in a gesture that once would have felt intimate but now seemed calculated. "We should get back to the presentation," she said. "I want to make sure the marketing projections are clear before we present to the board." As we walked back toward the main conference room together, Lisa chatting about quarterly metrics and client retention rates, I felt like I was watching my marriage from outside my own body. Everything looked normal from the outside. We were still the successful Portland power couple, both climbing our respective corporate ladders, supporting each other's careers, working toward shared goals. But underneath that polished exterior, something fundamental had shifted, and I was the only one who didn't know the rules had changed. The presentation went smoothly, with Lisa delivering her marketing analysis with the confidence and charisma that had attracted me to her in the first place. Ryan sat 2 seats away from me, taking notes and nodding enthusiastically at every point she made. Watching them interact in that professional setting, I began to notice things I had missed before. The way their eyes met and held for just a moment too long. The way Lisa unconsciously leaned toward him when he spoke. The way Ryan's attention never wavered from her, even when other executives were presenting. After the meeting ended and everyone filed out of the conference room, I lingered behind, staring out at the Portland skyline and trying to process what I had discovered. The rain had stopped, but the windows were still streaked with water, distorting the view of the city where Lisa and I had built our life together. In a few hours, we would drive home to our house in Beaverton, eat dinner together, and probably watch Netflix before going to bed in the same king-sized bed we had shared for 8 years. We would go through all the motions of being a married couple, but I would know that Lisa's heart and mind were somewhere else entirely. The most devastating part wasn't even the emotional betrayal, though that cut deep enough. It was the realization that our marriage counseling, the thing I had hoped would save us, had become another lie. Every session where Lisa talked about feeling distant and disconnected, she was describing feelings that had already found resolution with someone else. Every homework assignment Dr. Hayes gave us to improve our communication, Lisa was probably practicing with Ryan. Every breakthrough we thought we were making together was meaningless, because Lisa was already building something new with another person. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Michael Thompson's number. Michael was the divorce attorney who had handled my brother's custody case 2 years earlier. I had never imagined I would need his services myself, but life has a way of preparing you for moments you never saw coming. Instead of calling, I sent a simple text message. Hi, Michael. This is David Chen, Tom's brother. I think I'm going to need your help. Can we schedule a consultation this week? The response came back within minutes. Of course, David. I have an opening Thursday at 3 p.m., my office downtown. I will take good care of you. As I walked toward the elevator, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. For the first time since our marriage started struggling, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Lisa had made her choice when she decided to share our most intimate therapeutic space with another man. Now, it was time for me to make mine. The drive home that evening felt like traveling through a fog of deception. Lisa sat in the passenger seat of our Subaru, scrolling through her phone and occasionally commenting on traffic or pointing out changes in our neighborhood. Her voice carried the same casual warmth it always had, but now every word felt calculated, every gesture performed. I found myself analyzing her behavior with the scrutiny of a detective, searching for clues I had been blind to for months. Our house in Beaverton looked exactly the same as it had that morning when we left for work together. The garden Lisa had planted last spring was thriving. The mailbox still bore both our names in elegant script, and the porch light automatically switched on as we pulled into the driveway. Everything appeared normal, stable, permanent, yet felt like I was approaching a stranger's home, a place where I no longer belonged. Inside, Lisa immediately headed to the kitchen to start dinner, humming softly as she opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients for what looked like chicken stir-fry. This was our routine, our comfortable domestic rhythm that had developed over years of shared meals and quiet evenings. She would cook while I changed out of my work clothes and set the table. We would eat together, discussing our days, planning weekend activities, and maintaining the illusion of partnership that apparently only I believed was real. "How was your afternoon after the board meeting?" I asked, loosening my tie and watching her rinse vegetables in the sink. It was an innocent question, the kind of casual check-in that married couples exchange every day. But now I was listening for inconsistencies, gaps in her timeline, mentions of Ryan that she might let slip. "Pretty standard," Lisa replied, not looking up from the cutting board where she was dicing peppers with practiced efficiency. I had to review some campaign proposals, and Ryan needed guidance on the Morrison account presentation. He's really stepping up lately, taking on more responsibility. There it was. Ryan's name dropped into casual conversation like it belonged there. Like he was just another colleague rather than the person she was apparently building an emotional relationship with. The ease with which she mentioned him made my stomach clench. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a recent development. This was someone who had become so integrated into her daily thoughts that excluding him from conversation would be unnatural. "That's good," I managed to say, pulling plates from the cabinet and trying to keep my voice neutral. "The company needs strong performers in marketing, especially with all the new client acquisitions." Lisa nodded enthusiastically, her face lighting up in a way that had become rare when we discussed anything related to our personal life. Exactly. Ryan has this fresh perspective that really complements the team dynamics. He's not afraid to challenge conventional thinking, you know. Sometimes experience can make you too cautious, too stuck in old patterns. I paused with the silverware in my hands, struck by the implication of her words. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Was she talking about marketing strategies, or was this a thinly veiled commentary on our marriage? Had I become too predictable, too comfortable, too much of what she wanted to escape? The Ryan she described sounded like everything I used to be 8 years ago when we first met, before mortgages and miscarriages and the weight of adult responsibilities had settled over us like a heavy blanket. Dinner proceeded with our usual small talk, but I found myself studying Lisa with new eyes. She looked beautiful, perhaps more beautiful than she had in months. Her hair was styled differently, a subtle change I had attributed to wanting to look professional for her director role. Her makeup was more carefully applied than usual, and she was wearing the earrings I had bought her for our anniversary last year. Earrings she claimed were too fancy for everyday wear. I might need to work late tomorrow, she said between bites of stir-fry, her tone carefully casual. We're finalizing the Morrison presentation, and I want to make sure everything is perfect before Friday's client meeting. Will Ryan be staying late too? The question slipped out before I could stop myself, and I immediately regretted the edge of suspicion that colored my voice. Lisa looked up sharply, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. Probably. Why do you ask? Just wondering if you'll have help, or if you'll be handling everything yourself. I forced a smile, trying to recover from my obvious fishing expedition. I know how much pressure you're under with this new role. She studied my face for a moment, and I wondered if she could see through my attempt at casual concern. David, is everything okay? You seem tense tonight. The irony of her asking me about my emotional state while she was apparently sharing intimate details of our marriage with another man almost made me laugh. Instead, I took a deep breath and decided to test the waters. I've been thinking we should schedule another session with Dr. Hayes, I said, watching her reaction carefully. It's been a few weeks since we paused therapy, and I feel like we could use a check-in. Lisa's expression flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression of what looked like panic before she composed herself. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. Right now, work is so crazy, and honestly, I feel like we've been doing much better lately. Don't you think? Have we? I asked quietly, because I feel like we're more distant than ever. She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch warm and familiar, yet somehow foreign. David, every marriage goes through phases. We're both focused on our careers right now, and that's not a bad thing. We're building our future together. The word together hung in the air between us like a lie neither of us was willing to acknowledge directly. Lisa squeezed my hand gently, and I realized she genuinely believed what she was saying. In her mind, whatever was happening with Ryan wasn't threatening our marriage because it existed in a separate compartment of her life. She could maintain both relationships simultaneously, as long as I remained oblivious to the parallel emotional connection she was nurturing. After dinner, we settled into our evening routine. Lisa curled up on one end of our sectional sofa with her laptop, claiming she needed to review some marketing analytics before tomorrow's early meeting. I sat on the other end with my own computer, pretending to catch up on industry news while actually researching divorce procedures and trying to understand what the next few months might look like. The soft clicking of Lisa's keyboard filled the comfortable silence of our living room, occasionally punctuated by the sound of her typing a message on her phone. Each notification made me wonder if Ryan was on the other end, receiving updates about her day, her thoughts, her feelings that she no longer shared with me. Around 9 o'clock, Lisa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and smiled before answering, "Hey, what's up?" Her voice took on a warmth and intimacy that I recognized from the early days of our relationship. "Oh, that's perfect. Oh, I was hoping you'd figure out that section." She laughed softly at something the caller said, unconsciously twirling a strand of hair around her finger, in a gesture I hadn't seen in months. I didn't need to ask who was calling. The transformation in Lisa's entire demeanor told me everything I needed to know. This was how she used to talk to me when we were dating, when every conversation felt electric and full of possibility. Now that tone was reserved for someone else, someone who could make her smile just by the sound of his voice. The conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes, with Lisa occasionally glancing in my direction, as if suddenly remembering I was in the room. She spoke in the coded language of work collaboration, discussing presentation slides and client preferences, but underneath, the professional veneer was an unmistakable intimacy. They had inside jokes about difficult clients, shared frustrations about company politics, and a rhythm of communication that spoke to hours of private conversation. When she finally hung up, Lisa looked almost guilty, like someone who had been caught in a moment of inappropriate pleasure. "Work call?" I asked, though we both knew it was a rhetorical question. "Ryan had some questions about tomorrow's presentation timeline," she said, already turning back to her laptop. "He's really dedicated, staying up late to make sure everything is perfect." I wanted to point out that it was past 9 o'clock, hardly an appropriate time for professional consultation between a supervisor and her subordinate. I wanted to ask why Ryan felt comfortable calling our house instead of sending an email or waiting until morning. I wanted to demand an explanation for the intimacy I had witnessed, the way her entire body language had changed during their conversation. Instead, I closed my laptop and stood up from the couch. I'm going to take a shower and head to bed early. Long day tomorrow. Lisa looked up from her screen with what appeared to be relief. Okay, I'll be up in a little while. I just want to finish reviewing these metrics. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard the soft ping of another text message arriving on Lisa's phone, followed by her quiet laughter. The sound followed me down the hallway like an echo of everything I was losing. Everything that was already gone but not yet officially acknowledged. In our bathroom, I stared at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. 8 years of marriage had changed both of us. But I wondered if the changes in me had driven Lisa away, or if she simply would have found her way to someone like Ryan regardless. Was I too comfortable, too predictable, too focused on building security instead of maintaining excitement? Or was this simply the natural evolution of a relationship that had run its course, with both of us too afraid to admit it until someone else appeared to make the decision easier? The hot water of the shower felt good against my tense shoulders, but it couldn't wash away the growing certainty that my marriage was already over. Lisa had checked out emotionally months ago, and was just now catching up to a reality she had been living for quite some time. By the time I got out of the shower and brushed my teeth, I could hear Lisa's voice drifting up from downstairs, soft and animated as she engaged in what was obviously another phone conversation. The murmur of her words was punctuated by laughter, and long pauses that suggested she was doing more listening than talking, hanging on every word from whoever was on the other end of the line. I climbed into our king-size bed alone, pulling the covers up to my chin and listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. This was the home Lisa and I had chosen together, painted together, filled with furniture we had selected. As a team, every room held memories of our life as a couple, from the kitchen, where we had hosted dinner parties, to the spare bedroom, where we had planned to put a nursery before our second miscarriage changed those dreams forever. Now it felt like a museum of a relationship that no longer existed. A collection of artifacts from a time when Lisa and I were genuinely partners rather than roommates sharing expenses and maintaining appearances. Around 10:30, I heard Lisa's footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sounds of her getting ready for bed in the bathroom. She slipped into bed beside me quietly, probably assuming I was already asleep. Her presence felt both familiar and foreign, like sleeping next to someone who looked like my wife, but had become someone else entirely. "Good night, David," she whispered into the darkness, her voice carrying what sounded like genuine affection. "Good night," I replied, wondering if this would be one of our last nights sharing the same bed. The same dreams, the same illusion of forever. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that usually energized me, but I woke up feeling like I had been carrying stones in my chest all night. Lisa was already in the shower when my alarm went off, singing softly to herself in a way that reminded me of the early days of our relationship, and every morning felt like a celebration. The irony wasn't lost on me that she seemed happier than she had in months, while I felt like I was drowning. Over coffee, I watched Lisa prepare for her day with meticulous care. She spent extra time on her makeup, choosing a dress I had never seen before, and sprayed herself with the expensive perfume she typically reserved for special occasions. When I complimented her appearance, she blushed and claimed she had an important client lunch that required looking professional. The explanation felt rehearsed, delivered with the kind of casual confidence that comes from practice. At the office, I found myself paying attention to details I had previously ignored. The way Lisa's face lit up when Ryan appeared in the doorway of our shared workspace, how she unconsciously adjusted her posture and smoothed her hair when he approached her desk, the frequency with which they found excuses to collaborate on projects that seemed to require extensive private consultation. During my lunch break, I did something I had never done before in 8 years of marriage. I drove to a coffee shop across the street from our building and positioned myself where I could observe the main entrance. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad detective movie, but I needed to see what Lisa was doing during the client lunch she had mentioned that morning. At 12:15, Lisa emerged from the building wearing a light jacket over her dress, looking around the street with the anticipation of someone meeting a date rather than heading to a business meal. Within minutes, Ryan appeared from around the corner, having clearly exited from a different door to avoid being seen leaving together. He was dressed more formally than usual, wearing a button-down shirt instead of his typical casual polo, and carrying what looked like a small gift bag. I watched them walk toward the trendy bistro 2 blocks down, close enough to appear professional to casual observers, but with an obvious comfort and familiarity that spoke to dozens of similar outings. Ryan held the door for Lisa with a gallant gesture and through the restaurant's large windows. I could see them being seated at a corner table that offered privacy from other diners. The sight of them together in that intimate setting made something crystallize in my mind. This wasn't a recent development or a momentary lapse in judgment. Lisa and Ryan had been building a relationship for months, complete with private lunches, personal gifts, and the kind of courtship rituals that belonged in the early stages of romance. What I was witnessing wasn't infidelity in the traditional sense. It was the careful construction of an entire parallel emotional life. I returned to the office feeling sick to my stomach, but strangely clear-headed. The evidence was no longer circumstantial or subject to alternative interpretation. Lisa was having an affair, even if it hadn't yet become physical. More devastating than the betrayal itself was the realization that she was capable of maintaining such an elaborate deception, while continuing to share a bed with me, plan weekend activities together, and discuss our future as if it were still mutual. That afternoon, I found myself studying the company directory on our internal website, looking up Ryan's background and employment history. He had joined our company straight out of Portland State University with a marketing degree and impressive internship credentials. His LinkedIn profile showed an ambitious young professional eager to make his mark in the tech industry. His personal social media accounts revealed someone who enjoyed hiking, craft beer, and live music, someone who represented everything Lisa claimed to miss about her younger self. At 3 o'clock, I left the office early and drove downtown to Michael Thompson's law firm. The building was one of those sleek glass towers that housed successful businesses and conveyed serious professionalism. Michael's office occupied the 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Portland's skyline and the Willamette River beyond. Michael was exactly what I expected from a successful divorce attorney. Impeccably dressed and radiating the kind of competent authority that probably cost his clients significant hourly fees. He welcomed me with a firm handshake and the practiced empathy of someone who specialized in helping people navigate the worst periods of their lives. "Tell me about your situation, David," he said, settling behind his mahogany desk with a legal pad and expensive pen. "Tom mentioned you might be dealing with some marital difficulties." I found myself telling the entire story, from the discovery of Ryan's text message to my observations during their lunch meeting that afternoon. Michael listened without interruption, occasionally making notes and asking clarifying questions about our financial situation, property ownership, and whether we had any children together. The absence of children simplified certain aspects of potential divorce proceedings, but it also eliminated one of the traditional reasons couples fight to save struggling marriages. "Based on what you've described," Michael said when I finished, "my account, it sounds like your wife is having an emotional affair that may or may not have progressed to physical intimacy. In Oregon, we have no-fault divorce laws, which means you don't need to prove adultery or assign blame to end your marriage. However, if there's been financial misconduct or if marital assets have been used to support this relationship, that could impact property division." He explained the divorce process in clinical terms that made the dissolution of 8 years feel like a business transaction. Community property laws, spousal support calculations, retirement account divisions, and timelines for court proceedings. The practical aspects of ending a marriage were apparently much more straightforward than the emotional devastation it represented. "My recommendation," Michael continued, "is that you take some time to gather financial documentation before we file any papers. Bank statements, credit card records, investment accounts, anything that shows how marital assets have been used recently. If your wife has been using joint funds to support her relationship with this coworker, we need to document that pattern." I left Michael's office with a manila folder full of forms to complete, and a timeline that would fundamentally change my life within the next 60 days. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like descending into a new reality, where I was no longer a married man working to save his relationship, but someone preparing to legally dissolve the central organizing principle of his adult life. That evening, Lisa arrived home later than usual, claiming the client lunch had extended into an afternoon strategy session. She was glowing with excitement, describing a potential new account that could significantly expand our company's market presence. Her enthusiasm felt genuine, but I found myself wondering how much of her happiness came from. I had some meetings downtown and got caught up on several projects. Lisa nodded absently, already moving toward her phone to check messages. I watched her face light up as she scrolled through what were obviously personal texts rather than work communications. The transformation in her expression, from polite marital interest to genuine delight, told me everything I needed to know about where her emotional energy was focused. Over dinner, I found myself conducting an experiment in honesty. I started asking direct questions about her day, her lunch meeting, and her current projects. Curious to see how elaborate her deceptions had become. Who was at the client lunch today? I asked casually. Just the Morrison team leads and myself, Lisa replied without hesitation. We spent most of the time discussing their Q4 marketing objectives and budget allocation for next year. The lie came so smoothly that I wondered if she had prepared this version of events, or if deception had become so natural that she could improvise convincing stories without effort. I thought about mentioning that I had seen her at the bistro with Ryan, just to observe her reaction, but decided the confrontation could wait until I had completed the financial documentation Michael had requested. Instead, I excused myself after dinner and retreated to my home office, where I began the methodical process of reviewing our joint financial accounts. Credit card statements revealed a pattern of charges I hadn't noticed before. Expensive lunches at restaurants we had never visited together. Online purchases from stores that didn't match Lisa's usual shopping preferences. Concert tickets and event admissions that I had no memory of attending. The most damning evidence came from our joint checking account, where I discovered a series of small cash withdrawals over the past 2 months. $50 here, $75 there. Amounts too small to trigger my attention during casual account reviews, but adding up to nearly $800 in untraceable spending. Lisa had been systematically creating a discretionary fund for activities she didn't want documented through credit card records. As I printed bank statements and organized financial records, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with profound sadness. The relief came from having concrete evidence that validated my suspicions, proof that I wasn't imagining problems or overreacting to innocent workplace relationships. The sadness came from recognizing how far Lisa had traveled away from our marriage, how much effort she had invested in building something new, while allowing what we had created together to deteriorate through neglect. Around 10 o'clock, I heard Lisa's phone ring downstairs, followed by her familiar laughter and the animated conversation that had become her evening routine. The sound no longer surprised me, but it served as a reminder that while I was documenting the end of our marriage, she was actively nurturing its replacement. I closed the financial files and walked to our bedroom window, looking out at the quiet suburban street where we had imagined raising children and growing old together. The house across from ours had a for sale sign in the front yard, and I wondered if our neighbors were also dealing with major life changes, or if they were simply upgrading to something bigger and better. In a few months, this house would need to be sold, or one of us would need to buy out the other's equity. The garden Lisa had planted would become someone else's responsibility. The mortgage we had been paying down together would be restructured or eliminated. All the practical achievements of our partnership would be dissolved and redistributed according to legal formulas that had nothing to do with love, commitment, or the dreams we had once shared. The most painful realization was that Lisa probably had no idea I was aware of her relationship with Ryan. She believed she was successfully managing two separate emotional lives, maintaining our marriage while exploring new possibilities with someone who represented everything she felt was missing from her current situation. In her mind, she was keeping all her options open rather than actively destroying what we had built together. Tomorrow, I would continue gathering evidence and preparing for conversations that would change everything. But tonight, I would go to bed beside my wife one more time, listening to her breathing in the darkness and remembering what it felt like when we were genuinely happy together. Before either of us knew that love alone wasn't enough to sustain a marriage through every challenge life could present. Friday evening came with the kind of autumn chill that usually signaled cozy nights at home, but I had made other plans. Lisa announced over breakfast that she would be working late again, helping Ryan prepare for Monday's Morrison presentation. The explanation felt so routine now that she delivered it with barely concealed excitement, like someone sharing news about an anticipated vacation rather than overtime, work responsibilities. I decided to cook dinner anyway, something I hadn't done in weeks. Not because I expected Lisa to be home to share it, but because I wanted to create one final gesture of the care I had put into our marriage for 8 years. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home from work and bought ingredients for Lisa's favorite meal. The same dish I had prepared for our second anniversary when we were still living in that cramped studio apartment downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was cooking for a woman who was probably sharing takeout with another man at that very moment. I needed to complete this ritual for my own sense of closure. As I seasoned the salmon and prepared the risotto that had taken me dozens of attempts to perfect years ago, I found myself remembering the early days of our relationship when such gestures felt natural and reciprocated. Lisa had always claimed to appreciate my cooking, often posting photos of elaborate meals I prepared on her social media, with captions about how lucky she was to have such a thoughtful husband. Looking back, I wondered if those posts were more about maintaining appearances than expressing genuine gratitude. Had she been performing the role of appreciative wife while already feeling constrained by domestic expectations? Around 7 o'clock, as I was finishing the final touches on what would likely be my last attempt to nurture our relationship through food, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Working later than expected. Don't wait up. We'll grab something. Here." The message was brief and matter-of-fact, treating me like a roommate who needed to be informed about schedule changes rather than a husband who'd spent 2 hours preparing her favorite meal. I stared at the perfectly plated dinner for two, steam still rising from the risotto, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't anger or sadness anymore. It was acceptance. Lisa had made her choice weeks or months ago, and I was finally catching up to a reality she had been living while I remained committed to a marriage that existed only in my imagination. Instead of eating alone at our dining room table, I packaged the entire meal into containers and drove to my brother Tom's house across town. Tom and his wife Sarah were surprised to see me arriving unannounced with enough food for 4 people, but they welcomed me with the kind of warmth I hadn't experienced at home in months. "This smells incredible," Sarah said as we set the table in their kitchen. "What's the occasion?" I found myself telling them the truth about Lisa and Ryan, about the text messages and secret lunches and the systematic dismantling of our marriage that had been happening while I focused on work and assumed everything was fundamentally stable. Tom listened with the protective anger of an older brother, while Sarah expressed the kind of feminine insight that helped me understand aspects of the situation I had been too close to see clearly. "She's probably been unhappy for longer than you realize," Sarah said gently. "Women don't usually start emotional affairs overnight. There's typically a period of feeling disconnected and undervalued that makes someone else's attention feel like salvation." The observation stung because it contained uncomfortable truth. Lisa and I had been struggling with intimacy issues since our second miscarriage 18 months ago. I had attributed our distance to grief and assumed time would eventually heal what trauma had damaged. But maybe Lisa had interpreted my patience as indifference, my stability as complacency, my commitment to working through difficulties as acceptance of a fundamentally flawed relationship. "The question is," Tom said, "over dessert, what are you going to do now? You going to fight for your marriage or accept that it's over?" The question crystallized something I had been avoiding. Fighting for my marriage would require confronting Lisa about her affair, demanding she choose between Ryan and me, and rebuilding trust that had been systematically eroded over months of deception. It would mean couples counseling with Dr. Hayes, who had already been compromised by Lisa's decision to share our therapeutic space with another man.
Out.
It would require both of us to acknowledge that our relationship had fundamental problems. That went deeper than external stressors or temporary disconnection. Accepting that our marriage was over meant moving forward with divorce proceedings, dividing assets, and starting my life over at 34 years old. It meant admitting that 8 years of shared dreams and mutual investment had been insufficient to sustain us through the kind of challenges that many couples navigate successfully. Driving home that night, I realized I had already made my choice. Not through any dramatic moment of decision, but through the accumulation of small betrayals and the gradual recognition that Lisa had emotionally left our marriage months ago. I was simply acknowledging what had already happened rather than deciding what should happen next. The house was dark when I arrived home. Lisa's car absent from the driveway, despite her promise to return later in the evening. I let myself in through the front door and immediately noticed her laptop bag sitting on the kitchen counter, suggesting she had been home at some point but left again. A quick check of our bedroom revealed that she had changed clothes, swapping her work attire for the casual dress she typically wore on weekend dates with me. My phone buzzed with another text message. Staying at Jenny's tonight. Girls' night turned into sleepover. See you tomorrow. Jenny was Lisa's college roommate, who lived in Southeast Portland, someone Lisa occasionally visited for wine nights and catching up on gossip. The explanation was plausible enough to deflect casual suspicion, but I knew Jenny well enough to know she typically went to bed early and rarely hosted spontaneous sleepovers on work nights. Rather than feeling angry about the obvious lie, I experienced something closer to gratitude. Lisa's absence gave me the opportunity to complete the financial documentation Michael had requested without worrying about her discovering my preparations. I spent the next 3 hours at my home office desk, organizing bank statements, investment account summaries, property deeds into neat folders that would tell the story of our marriage in purely economic terms. The documentation revealed patterns I hadn't noticed during our day-to-day financial management. Lisa had been gradually shifting her direct deposit allocations, reducing the percentage that went into our joint accounts while increasing contributions to her personal savings. She had also been using our joint credit card less frequently, suggesting she was funding her activities through cash or alternative payment methods that wouldn't create records I could access. Most tellingly, I discovered that Lisa had been researching apartment rentals in Southeast Portland, the same neighborhood where Jenny lived. Her browser history, which we had never bothered to hide from each other during 8 years of marriage, showed dozens of visits to rental websites and virtual tours of one-bedroom apartments within a 5-mile radius of our company's office. The evidence painted a picture of someone methodically preparing for independence. While maintaining the facade of marital commitment, Lisa wasn't just having an affair. She was planning her exit strategy with the same careful attention to detail. She brought 2 marketing campaigns at work. The realization that she had been lying to me for months while simultaneously planning to leave was somehow more devastating than discovering the emotional infidelity itself. Around midnight, I completed the financial analysis and placed all the documents in a manila envelope addressed to Michael Thompson's office. The process had taken most of the evening, but it provided the kind of concrete clarity that emotional rumination never could. Whatever happened next between Lisa and me would be based on factual evidence rather than speculation or hope. Myself a glass of whiskey and sat in our living room, surrounded by furniture we had chosen together and photographs documenting 8 years of shared experiences. The silence of the house felt different than it had on previous nights when Lisa worked late or traveled for business. This was the silence of abandonment rather than temporary separation. The quiet that settles over spaces where people once lived together but no longer truly shared their lives. My phone rang at 12:30, Lisa's name appearing on the screen, with a call that surprised me given her claimed sleepover at Jenny's house. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won over avoidance. Hey, Lisa's voice sounded different, softer and more vulnerable than it had in recent conversations. I know it's late, but I wanted to make sure you got my message about staying at Jenny's. I got it, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I hope you're having fun catching up with her. There was a pause on the other end of the line, filled. With the kind of silence that suggested Lisa was choosing her words carefully. David, I feel like we've been distant lately. I don't want you to think it's because I don't care about our marriage. Work has been stressful, and I know I haven't been the best wife recently. The apology felt rehearsed, like something she had been practicing or perhaps discussing with someone else who had advised her to reach out and reassure me. The timing was suspicious, coming just hours after she had chosen to spend Friday night somewhere other than home. I understand that work is demanding, I said, wondering if Ryan was sitting beside her while she made this call. Just want you to be happy, Lisa. I am happy, she said quickly, perhaps too quickly. I want us to be happy together. Maybe we should plan something special for the weekend, just the two of us. The suggestion might have excited me a week ago. Now it felt like another performance designed to maintain appearances while she figured out her next move. Lisa was offering me breadcrumbs of attention while feast elsewhere, and I was finally tired of being grateful for scraps. That sounds nice, I said without enthusiasm. You can talk about it when you get home tomorrow. After we hung up, I finished my whiskey and headed upstairs to our bedroom, where I would spend another night alone in the bed I had shared with Lisa for 8 years. The king-size mattress felt enormous when occupied by only one person, a reminder of the space that used to be filled by someone who now preferred to be elsewhere. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the envelope of financial documents sitting on my desk downstairs, ready to be delivered to Michael Thompson's office on Monday morning. In 3 days, I would begin the legal process of dissolving my marriage, transforming 8 years of shared life into a series of property divisions and support calculations. But tonight, I was still technically married to a woman who was lying to me about her whereabouts while planning her departure and building a relationship with someone else. The contradiction felt surreal, like existing in the gap between one life ending and another beginning, suspended in a reality that everyone else had moved beyond while I struggled to catch up. Monday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine, the kind of clear October day that made Portland feel like the perfect place to start over. I woke up early and drove to Michael Thompson's office before heading to work, delivering the manila envelope of financial documents that would set the wheels of my divorce in motion. Michael's paralegal assured me they would begin preparing the initial paperwork immediately, with everything ready for my review by Wednesday afternoon. At the office, I watched Lisa move through her morning routine with newfound clarity. She was practically glowing, having returned from her supposed girls' night with Jenny, looking refreshed and radiant in a way that suggested her weekend had been far more romantic than recreational. When she stopped by my desk to ask about my weekend, her smile felt performative. It's like an actress playing the role of caring wife for an audience of colleagues who still believed we were happily married. Around 10 o'clock, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of continuing the elaborate dance of pretending everything was normal, I walked over to Lisa's office and knocked on her open door. She looked up from her computer screen with genuine warmth, probably assuming I was there to discuss weekend plans or share some mundane piece of office gossip. "Hey," she said, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from her desk. "What's up?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on her desk between us with deliberate precision. Michael Thompson's name and contact information were printed in elegant black lettering, with divorce attorney clearly visible beneath his credentials. Lisa stared at the card for several seconds, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to what looked like panic. When she finally looked up at me, her face had gone pale. "David, what is this?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know about Ryan," I said simply. "I know about the lunches, the phone calls, the apartment hunting, and Dr. Hayes' contact information. I know you've been planning your exit from our marriage while pretending everything was fine." Lisa's mouth opened and closed several times, without producing sound, like someone trying to speak underwater. Finally, she managed to say, "It's not what you think." The response was so predictable, so cliché, that I almost smiled. "It's exactly what I think, Lisa. You're having an emotional affair with your subordinate. You've been lying to me for months, and you're using our joint resources to fund a relationship with someone else." She reached across the desk, as if to take my hand, but I pulled back before she could make contact. The gesture felt desperate. a last-ditch attempt to maintain control over a narrative that had already slipped away from her. "David, please, we can work through this. Doesn't have to mean anything permanent." "It already is permanent," I replied, standing up from the chair. "You gave him our marriage counselor's number, Lisa. You shared the most intimate part of our relationship with the person you were replacing me with. There's no coming back from that." I walked toward her office door, then paused and turned back. "Michael Thompson is an excellent attorney. I'd recommend finding someone equally competent to represent your interests." The rest of that day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances from colleagues who had obviously heard about the confrontation in Lisa's office. By lunchtime, the news had spread through our small company that David and Lisa Chen were getting divorced, though the specific details remained private. Ryan appeared at my cubicle around 3 o'clock, looking uncomfortable and younger than his 26 years. "David, can we talk?" I followed him to an empty conference room, curious to hear what he had to say for himself.
Ow.
Ryan closed the door and immediately launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. "I want you to know that Lisa and I never intended for things to develop the way they did. We were just friends at first, and then she was helping me through some personal issues, and somehow it became something more." "Personal issues that required our marriage counselor's contact information?" I asked. Ryan had the decency to look ashamed. That was my idea. "I was struggling with some relationship anxiety, and Lisa mentioned that therapy had been helpful for you both. I didn't think about how inappropriate it was until later. The explanation was probably truthful as far as it went, but it revealed the fundamental selfishness that had allowed both Ryan and Lisa to justify their behavior. They had been so focused on their own emotional needs that they never considered the impact of their choices on anyone else. "I'm not angry with you, Ryan," I said, and was surprised to discover I meant it. "You're young, and Lisa was your supervisor. She had more responsibility to maintain appropriate boundaries than you did." Relief flooded his face, followed immediately by something that looked like guilt. "What happens now?" "Now you deal with the consequences of dating your boss while she was married to someone else. I'd suggest updating your resume." 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a different conference room, signing divorce papers that officially ended my 8-year marriage. Lisa had hired her own attorney and negotiated the property division with the kind of ruthless efficiency she brought to marketing campaigns. We split our assets down the middle, sold the house in Beaverton, and went our separate ways with minimal drama. The irony was that Lisa's relationship with Ryan didn't survive the transition from workplace affair to legitimate romance. Without the excitement of secrecy and the validation of being chosen over a spouse, their connection apparently lost its appeal. Ryan left the company 2 months after our divorce was finalized, and Lisa was left to rebuild both her personal and professional life from scratch. I moved into a downtown loft near the river, space that felt nothing like the suburban home Lisa and I had shared, but perfectly suited the person I was becoming. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Dr. Hayes at a coffee shop near her office. She approached me with the careful demeanor of someone who had heard about my situation through professional channels. "Oh, David, I want you to know how sorry I am about everything that happened. I had no idea Lisa was sharing my contact information inappropriately." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Lisa made her own choices about what to share and with whom." Dr. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "I hope you know that real healing is possible, even after betrayal. Sometimes the end of one relationship creates space for something much better." She was right, though I wouldn't discover that for several more months. The woman I eventually met at a bookstore in Southeast Portland was nothing like Lisa, and our relationship developed with a kind of honesty and mutual respect I hadn't realized was missing from my marriage. Emma was a freelance graphic designer who valued authenticity over excitement, partnership over passion, and building something sustainable rather than dramatic. Looking back, I realized that Lisa did me a favor by giving Ryan our marriage counselor's number. Her betrayal forced me to confront the reality that our relationship had been failing long. Before another man appeared to highlight our problems, she showed me what I didn't want in a partner, which made it easier to recognize what I did want when I finally found it. The business card I left on her desk that Monday morning represented more than just legal proceedings. It was my declaration of independence from a relationship that had become a performance. My refusal to continue pretending that love was enough to sustain a marriage built on deception and misplaced priorities. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst impulses and let them face the consequences of their choices. Lisa wanted the excitement of a new relationship without the responsibility of ending her old one. I gave her the opportunity to have exactly what she wanted, along with everything that came with it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.